Hello and welcome. You're watching Metropole Business Center with me, Fred Makori, and now we are joined with George Muga. How are you, sir? George, can you hear me? How are you?
Thank you, Fred. Thank you, Fred. Pleasure, my pleasure.
Yes, thank you for creating time. And today we are basically looking at the economic survey, and we're going to discuss, we're not going to get into detail because of time, but we're going to look at pertinent issues that have been highlighted in that report. And we witnessed growth in some key sectors: agriculture, construction, money, banking and finance, information and communication, while we saw a bit of contraction in manufacturing, energy, tourism, and like sectors. Was there any surprise in that?
I think, Fred, my only surprise is that finance and insurance or the financial sector recorded a growth.
Yeah.
I remember last year there were serious issues about provisions, if you can remember.
Yes.
And that was something that was directed all the way from Central Bank of Kenya. And therefore, from where I sit, I expected very minimal growth in the finance services industry, but recording a 5.6 growth is a big achievement for that sector.
Yes.
For the sectors that recorded negative growth, I think there's no surprises. Remember, tourism and hospitality was badly hit last year with several travel advisories, and of course the COVID-19 containment measures that badly affected that sector.
Yes.
The same to education. Remember, students were off session for a better part of last year, and therefore I expected even higher contraction in that industry. Yeah. Transport and storage, the same thing. That is logistics. With travel advisories, of course, that was bound to be affected. Apart from the local travel and maybe travel within the East African region, most of our supply chains across the globe were basically closed, so to speak. So that also was bound to happen. Wholesale and retail also recorded a contraction, which was bound to happen because of the reduced disposable incomes of most households in Kenya. Remember, most households either lost their jobs last year and therefore lost their incomes, and therefore there was very muted or reduced disposable incomes. When that happens, then that directly affects wholesale and retail trade. The same to manufacturing. I think manufacturing, we must give it to them that we expected them to go down, but 0.41% contraction is a good thing for that sector, because remember, even them, they're in this ecosystem, and therefore if the economy is not doing well, then they're bound to suffer in that space. My other surprise, Fred, is on construction, and we can explain this way. Remember, last year we had serious problems between mismatch on supply of office and even rental space to the demand side. But I believe this growth was funded or was buoyed mostly by public sector consumption in that subsector. Remember last year the government pushed the expressway, that's the JKA Westlands project, very much, and also several other road projects across the country. That explains why that sector recorded that growth. So the 11.8 probably was contributed by public sector consumption or public sector projects in that space. Otherwise, private sector contribution was quite minimal last year, Fred.
All right, and now generally this, when we put it now on the economic performance, generally, there was a drop, a contraction. I mean, 5% that we experienced in 2019, now we are at negative 0.3. That is huge. It's a huge drop. Could it have been any worse, or that is within the margin that we would have expected?
Fred, Kenya is a very resilient economy. I think this one we can now say with certainty that Kenya is a very resilient economy. Despite the numerous shocks that sometimes you have as an economy, Kenya is able to hold in there. and at least record something, albeit with difficulties. Remember, from the World Bank reports, the global economy contracted by 4.2%
Yes.
compared to a growth of 2.7% last year. So if you look at Kenya vis-a-vis the global economy, then probably we did better. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
If you look at those figures, and then if you look at the ADB report, that is African Development Bank report, African economies combined contracted by 2.1%.
Yes.
Vis-a-vis a growth of 3.4% in the previous year. So if you look at Kenya vis-a-vis its peers, then probably we did much better.
Yes.
The only economy in East Africa that grew was Tanzania, and that can be explained with the policies of the late John Pombe, of which he refused to close his economy with the advent of COVID-19. And that explains why that economy grew by, I think, 1% thereabout. Otherwise, the rest of the economies shared off by between 1% to around 3% in the entire East Africa. If you look at Uganda, you look at Rwanda, you look at Burundi, you look at DRC and our neighbors, Ethiopia. The economy is contracted by between 1% and 3%. So apart from Tanzania in our region, then probably Kenya performed better than our contemporaries in the region. And if you look at it in the African context, then I think very few economies did better than Kenya, albeit we recorded a contraction in the economy. So maybe what I can say is that we contained the pandemic better than our peers across the globe or in Africa.
All right. And George, you mentioned that Kenya is a resilient economy. What do we attribute this resilience to? If you may touch a bit on that before we move on.
I think, Fred, Kenya, if you look at the Kenyan economy, we are reliant on few industries, so to speak. We are reliant on agriculture, and then we are very reliant on manufacturing, and of course, we are very big in service, Fred. If you look at service, I think we are second or third after South Africa and probably Nigeria. If you look at the sub-Saharan Africa, and by service I mean banking, insurance, and of course telecommunications. And if you look at those industries, Fred, last year the banking industry posted quite some good performance within the context where we were in. In fact, most of the tier 1 banks reported profits, albeit with reduced growths. Initially, they were growing at between 10, 15, 20%, but last year, I think the growth went down to maybe some recorded 20% drop in their profits or 30% drop in their profit, but they still recorded quite some good profits if you look at it. Same to most of our insurance companies. I think apart from Britam, that recorded a significant reduction in their profit. The rest of the insurance companies recorded profits with albeit small decrease in their year-on-year profits. If you look at the telecoms market, Fred, our biggest player there is Safaricom. And if you look at their performance from 2018, 2019, the coming 2020, then you realize that 2020 was not a very good year to them, but they were still able to record some significant, I think it was 68 billion thereabout,
yes.
PAT, which is a good performance vis-a-vis our contemporaries. If you look at these companies that we have, vis-a-vis now their peers in the region, then you realize that they performed much better. If you compare them to their peers. I think Safaricom, if you look at it vis-a-vis now the other telcos operators across the region, then it's doing quite well. When you come to agriculture, last year was not a very bad year in agriculture. Our weather was not very bad. I think this year is much worse in terms of our weather patterns as compared to last year. So last year our harvest was not bad. We did very well in coffee and tea. Of course, with challenges in the marketing end, but the production end, I think we did very well. So agriculture and service, I think, gave us quite some good boost in terms of sector by sector economic growth. The other sectors that went down, tourism, education, and all that, that was expected, of course, with the travel advisories, and maybe we still expect them not to perform very well in 2021, but their recovery prospects as we go into 2022.
All right. All right, now 2021, how is it looking? What are some of the key sectors to watch in this year, even as we work on the recovery process?
2021, I read Yatani's brief, I think that was last week. Though his speech didn't inspire a lot of confidence in the economy, unfortunately. Being the CS in charge of Treasury, I felt maybe even if things are bad as the authority in that field, he must inspire confidence in the economy, because that is what investors read. So maybe that is something that maybe in his next press he needs to look into. We are recovering already, Fred. If you look at the industry that didn't do very well, education is back on its feet. I think almost 100%. Tourism and hospitality not yet there, but at least there are some signs that it is going to come back. Manufacturing, you can see that there's quite some good activity in the manufacturing subsector. If you look at the results that EABL posted last time they were reading their results, then it shows you that they're on the right track towards recovery. The same to manufacturers in the construction industry. That is, I'm referring to the likes of Bamburi Cement and the competitors that failed. And therefore, personally, despite the fact that Yatani said that we're not yet out of the woods, I think there are good pointers that the economy is going to recover in the next 1, 2, or 3 years. My only challenge, Fred, is that we are facing an electioneering period in the next, I think, 10 or 11 months, and the electioneering period in Kenya is not very well managed. So my only plea to government is that for the sake of the economy, we would ask them to manage this electioneering period effectively and efficiently, so that we don't lose the ground that we have covered already. With the serious hits, with the serious COVID-19 hits, we cannot absorb serious fissures or serious fractures in the economy with the electioneering period. This year, maybe in the next financial year, we will record a growth, but not very substantial. Maybe I'm foreseeing as recording a growth of maybe 1, 2, or 3% in terms of year-on-year GDP growth, but nothing more than that. I know Treasury is looking at maybe 5%, and I think World Bank has given us around 3.4, 3.9%. I'm seeing us doing between 3 and 4%. So it will not be as bad as 2020, but again, we are still not yet out of the depression as it were.
All right. I know you've touched a bit on the electioneering period that is we've actually gotten into when the campaign mode has kicked in, and in our country, I mean, when we get into the electioneering period, things sort of slow down, and it gets worse even around and about the elections at that point. This recovery, how significant will this period impact the recovery process that we've already started recording?
It will depend. It will purely depend on how we manage our electioneering. Let me paint for you scenarios that we might foresee next year. Next year we might have a one-off election, maybe that should be the second Tuesday of August. And once we have that, we have a president declared. And if that goes smoothly, then maybe we could be having a serious recovery coming into quarter 1 of 2023. At least things should start looking up. If that happens the way it is. The second scenario is where we have a contested election, and that might push us to a second rerun, where that will go maybe up to December of the same year. If that were to happen, Fred, then we might, as an economy, might start settling in the third quarter of 2023. That is to say, if that scenario was to happen, then we might lose 2022, a big percentage of 2022, because I can bet you that from January next year, you will see a lot of activity in the political side. And when that happens, there's very limited activity on the economic or on the private sector side. And if that goes for a period of 2 years, then it badly hits the economy. So the best case scenario is we do our election 2022 and clear with it within 2022, so that 2023 we are back into building the economy. The worst case scenario is where our electioneering spills over to 2023. If that were to happen, then we lose probably a period of 2 years in our economy. That is 2022 and 2023. But from where I sit, I normally like working with the best case scenario, Fred. I'm always optimistic, and therefore I think maybe that we might be done with the electionary period in 2022, so that 2023 we are back to normal economic activities.
All right, thank you, George. Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure hearing you crunch those numbers and just give us your perspective, and very optimistic, I must add. Thank you for creating the time to talk to us, George.
Thank you very much, Fred. Really appreciate it.
All right, that's George Muga, managing partner at FEA Kenya, and bring us to another break. We'll be back after the break.